He was a kid from the Bay Area with a difficult relationship with his mother. And while most kids could relate to that kind of situation, only one kid was the multi-talented and charismatic son of Afeni Shakur, controversial leader in the Black Panther Party. Episode 4 of the documentary series Dear Mama, the Saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur explores his incarceration and its impact on his art and activism. Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club. This is a show for Gen X hip hop fans who want to relive the glory days and reconsider classic and modern hip hop films from a current day perspective. Together, we'll explore some of the larger societal issues raised in these films. If you've seen today's movie before, you'll learn some fascinating trivia you might have missed. If you haven't seen today's movie before, then we'll help you decide whether this film is worth your time. Either way, you'll be a smarter hip hop fan by the end of this episode. The next 30 minutes or so, you'll get all this and more. We're three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and I saw Disorderlies in the theater when it came out in 1987.
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip hop fan, and at the time of this recording, I am mad hyped to go see the Rock the Bells Festival in Queens, New York this upcoming weekend, featuring LL Cool J, Run DMC, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, Slick Rick, Queen Latifah, De La Soul, The Roots, Ludacris, Method Man, Redman, and many, many more. Can't wait.
Nice. I'm excited for you. I'm Boogie, a DJ, longtime hip hop fan, and the first rap song that I ever learned all of the words to is Sucker MCs by Run DMC.
That's a great one.
In this episode, we'll answer the question, will Tupac's ambition break him?
Dear Mama, the Saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur is a TV documentary series about the complex man we knew as Tupac Shakur and his mother Afeni Shakur and her influence on his life. It premiered on FX on April 21st, 2023 and is available on Hulu. All right, let's dig into this episode 4. What did you guys learn about Tupac from this episode that you didn't know prior to watching this episode? Boogie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think the first thing I know, it wasn't necessarily something that I didn't know, but I think is that I didn't know that it was to this extent. It's like I always knew that he was a workhorse, but I had no idea of how much of a workhorse he was. I mean, there's always stories. There's mentioned all the time. We mentioned to Tupac about how they always saw him writing in a book, writing rhymes, always, trying to be on time for things and staying late. And it was funny because I was watching how they were talking about him, and I said, you know what? This is how other basketball players talk about Kobe Bryant. And it was kind of like it was a crazy parallel, but they were talking about how he would wake up at 5 a.m. after being up to, all kinds of ungodly hours in the morning on like maybe 3 hours of sleep. The alarm's going off and he's running out of the door. And they say, the outsiders basically had to be about 5 steps behind him. He's like, yo, when I leave, make sure they're right behind me. Get to the studio at this time so they can get going. And I was just like, wow, this dude is like crazy, like with his work ethic. But, it also to the point where they were saying that he was exhausting himself. But he kept pushing, but he was burning himself out. And so I think like with that, I was just like, wow, I didn't realize he was that much of a workhorse. And that's probably one of the biggest things that stuck out for me in that episode.
Dino Wright, anything to add on that?
I did come away with a sense of his work ethic. Like he really was sort of the Kobe Bryant of other rappers. Like no one worked harder than him. I'll say this. It felt like he had a real sense of he had to do all of this and work for 21 hours a day because that was like his mission. And I don't want to say that he thought he was going to die young, but it seemed like he had to be as creative as possible and make as many things as possible and take care of as many people as possible because he only had so long to live. But yeah, it's exhausting watching his schedule.
Yeah. I remember that producer, director Gobi, said, the one thing that shocked him about Tupac was how much creativity he packed into one day.
Yeah.
It's like, man, nonstop.
Gobi was funny. I like he called himself a wannabe filmmaker. Yeah, the work ethic was outrageous. I had some notes on that as well. It was like studio to set, studio set, studio set. And
Mhm.
this episode's entitled "Ambitions as a Writer," which is one of his songs. And he was so ambitious, he wanted to write movies, star in movies, direct movies. He had met with Malcolm X's daughter and Al Sharpton about projects. He wanted to do it all, and he had the talent to do it all. And then what happens is he gets linked up with Suge Knight. Well, the beginning of this episode is when he spends 8 months in the maximum security prison, Dannemora, and that was
Yeah.
just a nasty place. People were routinely getting stabbed and killed. And he actually put that Me Against the World album together while he was in prison. But he had some protection on the inside, which was good. But you can see how when Suge Knight took over Death Row Records, he bailed out Tupac. So Tupac felt a loyalty to him and to the West Coast because he was missing kind of that father figure, as we kind of hinted at in the last episode.
Hmm.
And so he kind of leaned that way, and that was his squad. Now it was the West Coast. He thought that he was set up when he got shot in New York, and he was out for vengeance.
Yeah, yeah. When he's in the beginning of the episode and he's talking about all the work he's doing in jail, putting on a record, and then as soon as he gets out of jail, he goes right to the studio. I mean, that's someone who's very committed. And as a creative person myself, I kind of feel that. Like I've never been to jail, but being cooped up and not being able to like really like express yourself creatively, I can relate to that. When I don't get a chance to do a podcast or do some other creative project for a while, I'm chomping at the bit. Like Tupac was this coiled cobra ready to strike.
Yeah.
He mentions that. I love how they kind of tell that story in this episode, and then they have the California Love playing like shortly in the
Yes.
opening credits, and he references his time in jail right in that song, and that's like he was so excited to be able to put those lyrics over Dre's beats,
Oh
and
Hmm.
it
yeah.
was a perfect marriage.
He called it after jail part two of his life. Thought
Yeah.
pretty poetic from a poet.
He was just 24 years old, and he wanted to live life to the fullest. So you see him kind of doing more of the party thing and just kind of living life to the fullest. And I love the little clips where they talk to Snoop Dogg or Mike Tyson. And
Yeah.
Hmm.
Snoop had a quote around that time, said he was happy and excited to join Death Row, but the environment was bad for him. Too much temptation and a little bit, chaos under the wing of Suge Knight.
Yeah. I think with Snoop too, he was excited kind of to be working with Dre because Dre was one of the hottest producers out. And then now they got the missing piece of the puzzle with Pac joining them. But like you said, the environment and the business side wasn't as pleasant to put it lightly as they'd wanted. But they were felt a bit of loyalty because of you know being where they were and the money was coming in and nobody wanted to interfere with that money coming in. There was a point where, Pac is standing and he's just counting $100 bill after $100 bill. It's just like, what? So now he's like, oh, now he can kind of fulfill that ambition of, taking care of everyone in his family that he wanted to take care of. But yeah, it was a hostile environment.
And the other piece of loyalty that Tupac felt to Suge Knight, Suge actually saved him from drowning. I didn't remember that incident from back in the day.
I wasn't aware of
I
that
wasn't aware
either.
of that.
Yeah.
So that's something new I learned also.
Yeah, yeah. And Snoop was saying that, Suge kind of took on the role as a big brother and said, one day we were riding in the Rolls Royce, and the next thing you know, he went and bought Snoop a Rolls Royce. it's like, man, it must be nice.
Yeah,
And
I can dig it.
yeah, you can see
Yeah,
more of the dynamic between Tupac and Snoop as well when they were both young. Snoop was fighting the murder charge because of his bodyguard being charged, and he was supposedly like an accomplice to the crime. And Tupac was so supportive of him because he kind of knew what it was like to be falsely accused, and so he had his
yes,
back. And it was like Tupac was wise beyond his years in terms of dealing with the legal issues because again the upbringing he had with Afeni, and it's kind of like Tupac was encouraging Snoop to be more of an activist, and Snoop was a little reticent, but he kind of was, his eyes were open to being more than just a rapper, like kind of trying to make a difference for the youth.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed hearing what Snoop had to say in this episode. From that perspective, he was explaining how he actually, when you say like how he developed a strong bond with Tupac, and it was refreshing to see that side of him being mentioned, um, because a lot of times, like from the media, you're like, oh, he's this crazy guy, he's hostile, he's this and he's that. But for somebody that was actually working extremely close with him, you got to see that he wasn't just this person that was out on a mission to do anything bad. He was actually very loyal and supportive of people that he felt needed it, or people that he felt would support him in return. I definitely enjoyed what Snoop had to say about him in this episode.
Yeah.
A bit refreshing.
What was some of the historical footage or other footage from Tupac's past that was most interesting to see?
One of them was his Rick James bit
Yes.
in school.
I was cracking up at that.
Oh, he was so funny.
It's just so ripe for parody, and he does it so well.
I didn't know what he was doing at first. I just saw the long wig. I thought he was trying to be a female or something, and then he goes into the Rick James impression. That was hysterical.
I'm just so conditioned by Dave Chappelle's Rick James impersonations that any long black wig is like Rick James.
Oh man.
It's amazing that exists, because that was 80s, 90s. Like, I'm glad someone had a VHS recorder.
Yeah.
It's gold.
Yeah.
That stuff is gold.
Yeah, somebody had the hindsight that they were going to be making some kind of documentary on him or something, because and to preserve that so well.
It's amazing what they had. Yeah.
Not like back then you could just film it and put it in the cloud.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really cool to see is Tupac at age 13 appearing in A Raisin in the Sun at the Apollo Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and he loved to perform, and that was kind of, his family was involved with the theater, and he got to act on the stage, and that was actually a fundraiser for Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
And they were talking about how in the rehearsals, they said that he was so good with his lines, and that he was helping everybody else with their lines. It's like he had that much talent at that age. That was cool. That was very cool.
It's one thing to be an actor and know your lines, but it's another thing to be an actor and know everyone else's lines.
Yes.
That's work ethic again.
Yes. I think one thing that caught me is interesting, when he was getting interviewed regarding Geronimo Pratt,
Mm-hmm.
how he was able to articulate the defense of his godfather. Is they were asking him about, are you aware that he's a murderer and things like that? And he's like, Tupac's like, hey, do you have proof of this, or were you a witness to this murder? Like, he's like, you told him, like, you can't speak on it because you haven't been there, or you didn't see it, or there's no proof. He's like, I would not come and talk badly about your family member like this, so why would you do it about mine? Like, he's my godfather. He's my godfather, so why would you bring that up? And it was like, wow, like it's like just the way he worded it, I was just like, huh, that makes a lot of sense. Like,
Very wise.
yeah, it's just like, wow. He's like, he was very sharp on the responses to questions, like not even really thinking about it, just boom.
That's that upbringing in the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I also really enjoyed the clips of his old friend John Cole, that was in
Yes.
Baltimore School of the Arts with him, and his drama teacher from
Yes.
Baltimore. Drama teacher saw this gem of a talent, and he's very empathetic. The drama teacher seemed very empathetic for what Tupac was going through, how he had moved multiple times, and
Mm-hmm.
it almost brought a tear to my eye when he said for the last time, he's like, my mom's moving to Oakland, and he said Tupac was crying. He's like, I gotta go, and it's kind of like losing this rising star that he's gonna become something,
Yeah.
and he left an indelible mark on everybody that he had touched.
Yeah, that really struck me for two reasons. One, that happened when he was 17. Like, that drama teacher already knew he's only 17. Like, his
Yeah.
whole life ahead of him. But the story that his drama teacher tells about him doing that performance to Vincent by Don McLean,
Oh
oh my
yeah.
God, it's my favorite part of this whole episode. And it's like right at the end, almost like a throwaway. And so for those of you who don't know, Vincent is like Don McLean's other hit besides American Pie. And so it's a song about Vincent Van Gogh. And you start to think, I know Tupac had a lot of range and like he liked all kinds of music, but here's a soft rock hit from the 70s. Like, what's Tupac messing around with this? But it's really poignant. It talks about seeing things with eyes that know the darkness in souls. And wow, you get to really see another example of Tupac's range. And the way that Alan Hughes does this in the film, it plays Vincent. It's very kind of emotive and kind of mid-tempo, and it goes right into Hit 'Em Up, which is very much not that. Oh my goodness, so much range. It was a nice tribute to Tupac to go from Vincent,
Yeah.
nice soft rock hit to one of the great battle diss tracks ever.
Yeah. 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 If we can link Vincent and probably hit
Yeah.
him up and show notes, that'd be pretty cool. So we could see the contrast. Because that song, man, when it was playing, I was like, wow. I'm like, I wish there was footage of him performing to this song. I'm like, somebody please come forward with it. Man, I would love to see that.
Like, I almost forget how direct these are shots fired. Like, that song is like, whoa, I forgot how strident it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's even mention they kind of cross some lines at the end, and he's really dissing people, and he's even talking about some like health ailments of the folks in Mob Deep, like sickle cell anemia and stuff. And it's like, oh man, they kind of went really beyond
Yeah.
what they should have.
He crossed the line, draw another line, then cross that line, draw another line,
Yeah.
then cross that line, draw another line, and cross that line.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard that song, my mouth dropped. I was like, what? From the first thing he says, you're like, what? And it was crazy because like at that particular period in life, I was out a lot. Like I was in a lot of parties, a lot of clubs, a lot of parties, a lot of clubs. And I kept hearing this song and I'm like, oh my God. It was just crazy. It's crazy. It's to the point I heard it so many times I started knowing the words to it. And I'm like, I don't want to sing this. I don't want to sing this. No.
And going back to something I didn't really realize, it was after the MTV Music Awards, and they had interviewed Tupac and Snoop right after, and Snoop didn't really seem like Snoop was backing up Tupac on this whole East Coast West Coast thing, and Tupac turned on Snoop a little bit, or maybe a lot bit after that. I didn't know about that. I didn't really think about that until now.
Yeah, I actually had that in my notes as well. And then Snoop was telling the story about how it all happened. He's like, he thought that Suge was going to take him out. He said, we're about to fly back to LA. He's like, yeah, your security can't come. So Snoop is the whole time like, all right, maybe they're gonna try to take me out. And he's like, talking about how he slept on a flight back with a fork and a knife, and one eye open. It's like, oh man, that's paranoia at its highest. Like you're like, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
And then you're looking at your best, like who at the time was one of your best friends. Like, yo, we going to the Tyson fight, and he's just like, Ips.
Yeah.
You're like, oh. So, he's like, I'm going back to LA, and the rest of them went to the fight in Vegas. And I know at that point, in hindsight, Snoop was probably like, yeah, I'm so glad I didn't go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the end of the episode. That was very haunting to see.
Yeah,
Snoop
it was.
Scared for his life, and the way he told that story, I was like, man, he was nervous as heck.
Yeah.
Because he didn't take that opportunity to badmouth Biggie and Puff Daddy at the MTV Awards. He didn't really
Yeah,
dive in. Suge Knight wanted to really jump on that and increase the beef, I guess, with the East Coast,
yeah,
West Coast. But
yeah. He's talking about at the time. He's like, I like Big and Puff. I want to do a song with Big and Puff. Like, why would I want to talk
Yeah,
bad about them? I want to do a song with them.
yeah, he's like,
yeah, he was not about to cut ties.
yeah. The one underlying theme that I took out of this episode too, and I think this was mentioned by his drama teacher from Baltimore too, part about Tupac being a chameleon. He always became someone. And that's how you see when we talk about when he takes on these roles, like when he became Bishop and Juice, and when he took on that role of like Haitian Jack. We talked about when he got into character and Gridlocked, he really took on that role of the heroin addict, and he went full on and like kind of like what they're trying to say in this episode is he took on this persona of the gangster lifestyle, whereas people were saying that's really not him. That's not him. But
Hmm.
he was
Yeah.
living that life, and he's under the tutelage of Suge Knight, and he's all in, and he becomes that person. So,
Yeah,
as we know, is a tragic ending. But yeah, that was his persona.
yeah. It's like one thing too that kind of struck out to me was I didn't realize he was in the process of starting a film company and a record label. He had like notes and documents that he was ready to move forward with in that process, in the process of making amends for some of his past bad behavior. Working and said, he had, was trying to reach out and apologize to, Spike Lee and John Singleton, et cetera, trying to say, hey, let's work together. I know I might have been a pain in the neck to work with back in the past, but I'm a different person. I want to move forward. And, it's a shame because I'm thinking to myself, like, man, he was thinking about starting his own record label. How would that have gone over with Suge? He was his cash cow. He was the cash cow for Death Row at that time.
Yeah, I think he signed for 3 albums, right? When he signed with Death Row, he
Yeah,
committed to putting out 3 albums with him. So he got
right.
the writing right away. But yeah, you're right. That would have violated probably the agreement.
Or like even if he put out the 3 and still said he wanted to walk.
Yeah, right.
Because I know, like, when Dre broke away from Death Row to start Aftermath, he had to leave all his rights and production for them songs with Suge. Like, he just walked away alive, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Pac have had to do the same thing, and Pac is a lot more outspoken than Dre is. How would that have gone down? It's like one of those what ifs.
Yeah.
What would you say is one of the more surprising things to you from this episode? I definitely have one.
The most surprising thing, I think, would probably be that whole situation with Snoop.
Yeah, that's definitely one.
Because I had never heard it, but I never heard that. I was like, wow,
Yeah, that
really?
was something new uncovered. The most surprising thing to me is knowing what we know about Suge Knight and his mean streak, understatement of the year. He held an annual Mother's Day event.
Yes.
He was the least likely person that I would think would hold a kind of company event for mothers to pay tribute to the mothers. I was like, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Tupac performing Dear Mama at it.
Yeah. Tupac.
That was nice.
yeah. Glow was like, I was there. I was just the number one,
Yeah.
the number one fan, the
Yeah.
original fan for him.
He was the original groupie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the original groupie. That's what she said, original groupie.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
mentioning Gloria, another thing that surprised me is that there was a part of this episode where she says that she was asked not to dance the way she was dancing because it was like gang signs or something, and they never really go back to that. And I thought, what happened there?
yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, she said she was dancing and she had her hands up, and somebody came over and tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Tupac said to sit down. You're throwing up gang signs." It's like what?
Seemed
Yeah,
odd.
they kind of rushed past that.
It was at Suge Knight's club, the 662 Club.
Yeah,
Yeah.
662. Yeah,
Yeah, you never know what can happen there. I don't know. So many good artifacts or like little historical footage. Like I love that picture of Tupac as an infant slash newborn, and they're talking about it was like 1 month and 3 days before he was born when the Panther 21 case was closed. You can see him with a pacifier. You see,
yeah,
and then as he grows up a little bit, and you see him with the family and leading up to the play, Raisin of the Sun. It's always neat to see those like going through an old scrapbook.
Yeah, all the way to the Machiavelli cake.
That's right, the Machiavelli cake.
Yeah, the Machiavelli
We had a
cake.
picture of him when he was in, what did he say, sixth grade or I forget.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Something
He
like
was
that.
about
Yeah.
13 or
He
so.
was going through learning about historical figures like, Machiavelli.
Yes.
And that became, wasn't that the album that was released posthumously? Machiavelli?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Don Killuminati's albums.
Yeah. One of the things too that they also they talked about, kind of sad though, was talking about how they had to keep moving around. It was hard with finances because Afeni couldn't keep a job for various reasons. Some people recognized her name or whatever reason she couldn't keep a job, and then she started smoking crack to cope with the stress and the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up having to leave New York to go to Baltimore. And like we mentioned earlier, with the drama teacher, they ended up having to move out to Oakland, and he had to go again. And it's like, man, I couldn't. That's a lot of moving, because I forgot how many addresses they counted when they were talking about how many addresses in New York, and they were mentioning them in the globe, but it was a lot.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they flashed up like 5 or 6. Yeah.
It's like 5 or 6 different addresses in that short period of time. Different neighborhoods to get used to, different people, being a new kid on the block. As his cousin mentioned, with an African sounding name, they got picked on and teased and had to fight. It's like, man.
Oh, that was the thing the drama teacher said. Yeah, they were giggling at his name when he was first introduced,
Mm-hmm.
and he stood up for himself. And the drama teacher, that's the last time anybody ever mentioned anything negative about his name.
Yeah, so they spoke for 10 minutes. They gave a 10-minute speech. Yeah. It's like, wow.
But you can see what shaped him. And I think somebody quoted this. It was like poverty, Panthers, guns, and like PTSD. It was almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Having moved so many times, having been through those harsh conditions, and then he really goes for the ringer, accused of this, falsely accused of this, being targeted here and there. You can see why he had a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, and they mentioned that even the kids, after Afeni's acquittal, the kids, and coming up, the kids would get harassed by local police and FBI agents following them and asking them weird questions about what was going on in the houses and stuff like that. That's a lot on the kid, especially when you really don't understand what's going on.
And the insight from his friend John Cole said that he would hang out with him. They'd be like in the dark a lot. There was, again, impoverished conditions. There was, did he say a mouse or a rat or something? He didn't have anything. There was a scene where there was like one potato for the family or something. They would cut up and make French fries. It lasted them a few days.
French fries, yeah.
Tupac, when he hits it big and he take care of the family, and he's like, man, I'm out of prison. I'm living my life. I'm just hanging out with the ladies and
Yeah.
trying to live life to the fullest. Another piece of footage I found very fascinating was, the Tim Roth footage. Tim Roth I love those interviews with him. He worked with Tupac on that movie Gridlocked, and it was a shame because he said they needed extra security on the set because of the East Coast West Coast feud escalating at that time.
Yeah.
Tupac had a funny quote where they were asking if he learned anything from Tim Roth, being a longtime actor. He's like, yeah, I learned exactly what not to do.
Yeah.
He was joking with him and having drinks with him and all that stuff. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. It was cool because 20 years later, see how charismatic and how magnetic he is on the screen. But to hear it from Tim Roth at the time, right then, about how like he basically put him on his heels, he put him on skates, how good he was, and Tim Roth had to step up his own game. And here's a seasoned actor saying this.
Yeah,
for a guy like it is basically like a brand new actor or just coming up. That was cool to see.
Oh, Mike Tyson. I forgot about this. The end.
Yes.
Is there a lesson to be learned about this? And it's like Mike Tyson's like, yeah, shut my effing mouth. It's like, yeah, don't escalate things unnecessarily.
Even Mike Tyson learned from this. Yeah.
Yeah. And one time, he's probably one of the most feared men walking the planet.
Yeah. Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Hip Hop Movie Club. On the next episode of the Hip Hop Movie Club podcast, your HHMCs review Episode 5, the exciting conclusion of Dear Mama, the Saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur. Subscribe today in your favorite podcast app, and you won't miss it. Shout out to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in.
And remember, don't hate, calculate.
Nice.
Calculate.
Do the math.
Mathematics.